Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lysha and I do all things epoxy resin and tumbler tutorials. In today's video, we're going to get into using some cute little molds for Valentine's Day. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is mix up some epoxy. So I have just kind of discovered a few of these molds and I thought they'd be perfect for making some cute little Valentine's Day magnets. But normally what I use with these kinds of molds, which I'm going to show you, is I usually will utilize whatever additional epoxy I have left over after epoxying cups or whatever the case may be. But I'm going to kind of start fresh with these to just show you the different ways that you can use your molds and how I'm going to change them and turn them rather into magnets. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting equal parts of part A and part B into a couple of medicine cups. I did mark off the 30 ml mark on either of the cups. That way I can make sure I get the correct amount of epoxy part A and part B in each of the cups, and then we're going to go ahead and mix these all together. That way we can start to separate them and add some different colorant. So now that I'm kind of done with that, let's take a look at the molds before we start to mix up our epoxy. So I found these cute molds on Amazon. The three larger molds are like three different heart shapes, and I grabbed those from Amazon I think last year. And then this is actually a jewelry mold. It's so that you can make different cute little jewelry pieces for pendants and things. And so I thought that this would be a really cute idea to just add some really cute magnets together just for kind of the holiday for Valentine's Day, as well as just as a way to just maybe add some little goodies to your tumbler packages. So I've also pulled out various inks and things that I'm going to be using. I'm using some inks from Jen's Crafted Gems, as well as some Pinata and Bria Reese inks, which I'll link down in the description box. Really, you can use anything you want. I decided not to use glitter for today's tutorial. I am going to use, though, Diamond Magic from my Asia Creations to mix into my entire pot of resin so that I do get a little bit of sparkle in all of the magnets. So now I'm just going to take a larger cup and I'm going to mix both part A and part B together. So I'm just pouring them into that cup, and then we're going to go ahead and give this a stir until this is thoroughly mixed. Usually anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes or so is more than enough time to stir your epoxy for KS resin. You want to stir slowly to minimize the amount of bubbles, of course, but certainly just stir until you don't have any cloudiness or any strings of epoxy. Now that it's mostly mixed, I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of Diamond Magic in there. That is a really ultra fine glitter that you can use as an additive for your final coats of epoxy. It gives whatever project you're working on a beautiful shimmer and shine. So now, starting with this large pot of epoxy, I have these larger molds here, and so I want to kind of add multiple colors to these molds. And so I'm going to start with just adding sort of that clear epoxy with just the Diamond Magic in it, just to kind of fill in just the bottom half of each of these three heart molds. These will be the bigger magnets that I use, and so all the magnets I made today were just kind of for fun. I just was having one of those Sundays where I just wanted to play with different colors and things and utilize some of my inks from the Dollhouse pack from Jen's Crafted Gems, because I haven't had a chance to use all of them and I wanted to see kind of what they did in epoxy. So I've already have a couple of different resin pieces that I've already kind of poured, and so what I just pulled out was one of the glittered hearts that I made previously that I hadn't turned into anything or utilized for anything. But what I love about this little bead jewelry mold is that you could use all of these different shapes for whatever you wanted. You could create magnets, you could also create, you know, maybe different charms for pen toppers. You can add them to tumblers. I actually have a cup that I'm working on, that I have been working on in my Facebook group, that has kind of like a wreath of all these different like glittered beads that I made with that jewelry bead mold. And so it's coming together quite nicely, but there's so many various ways that you can use kind of your additional epoxy in molds, but then to be able to utilize it for crafts that you're continuing to work on. So I just added also a little bit of some foil flakes that I had on hand into one of the other molds, of the other heart-shaped molds, and I'm going to go to that third one and again just fill in the bottom section. That way I can add a little bit of color in there, and that way we can add a second color on top after this first color has kind of cured and set. So I'm going to add to the very third mold some brass alcohol ink from, this is Pinata, I believe. And so I wanted to just see what different colorants would do together. I don't always get a chance to play with alcohol inks as much as I'd like to, at least not in the sense of playing with it inside of molds. I get to do a lot of that on tumblers, but I always like to see what I can create and what I can come up with when I am doing like molds and things using just alcohol inks versus using different glitters and things. So after I've kind of gotten that settled, I'm going to take the rest of this pot of epoxy and I'm going to separate it into a few medicine cups just so I can add different alcohol inks to these and be able to mix a few of these together for the beaded jewelry mold. So what I just did with the three larger hearts is I just sprayed the top of that with some rubbing alcohol, and that's going to pop all of the bubbles that are on the surface. So it's a great way to be able to pop your bubbles without having to utilize any heat whatsoever. So typically what I gravitate towards, I have seen also people use like a barbecue lighter, but because these are pretty decent molds, and because I wasn't filling especially that mold up all the way, I knew that I could get away with just using some 91% rubbing alcohol in my spray bottle to just kind of spray it down and pop all of those bubbles that are beginning to rise. So again, I'm separating the rest of the epoxy into my 4 medicine cups here, and then I'm going to add some of the alcohol inks that I showed in the beginning into these pots of epoxy. So in the first medicine cup, we're going to add Flinny. This is from the Jen's Crafted Gems Dollhouse pack. In the second, we're going to add Magenta. This is a Bria Reese ink. It's a magenta pink. And then we're going to add Crimson, which is a Ranger alcohol ink, into the third medicine cup there. Just a few drops of each. The Dollhouse colors are much lighter, so I do have to add, I did add probably more like 4 or 5 drops as I used it more thoroughly, just because it's meant to be a pastel color. So obviously if you want it to be a little bit more richer, you're going to want to add a few more drops or maybe mix it with another color. So I'm going to go ahead and just mix those 3 pots of epoxy that have the colorant to make sure that the color is evenly mixed in. And then I just kind of went with it. I just kind of started to use both medicine cups filled with the different colors just to mix into a couple of the heart-shaped molds. So because I'm going to use these as magnets for my custom order board to hold up the index cards that help me kind of determine where my, orders are and what step I'm on with them, I thought that, just mixing different colorants would be super cute, but just kind of sticking to the little heart-shaped molds because they're super cute. In this final mold, or in this final medicine cup here, I'm using this mica powder that I got forever ago. Like, I swear I got this when I first started working with tumblers. It's a beautiful, like, neon pink, but almost coral mica powder. It was part of like I think it was part of like a makeup mica powder set or something like that. If I can find it, I'll link it down in the description box in case you're looking for something like that. It came with a bunch of like bright neon colors. So I just decided this was perfect for kind of going with the Valentine vibe that I was going with for this kind of tutorial. So I did just add a little bit of the brass alcohol ink to the heart molds that I added. I will tell you that with your brass metallic alcohol inks, you want to lay those down first. So you're going to see that this isn't going to come out like I thought it would in my kind of brain when I had put it together. But I should have laid the brass alcohol ink or the metallic inks down first in like a little bit of clear epoxy and then put the color in on top like I am with the larger molds, because you're not going to see that through since these 2 alcohol inks are super dark. So I'm just kind of using the rest of the epoxy that I have mixed with my alcohol inks, and I'm just adding them to the different heart-shaped molds. There's also little ovals and squares on here. So again, you really could use like pressed flowers in these and maybe make a really cute picture frame. Again, you could add these pieces either glittered or with just, colored or tinted epoxy as part of the aesthetic for a tumbler. There's just so many different things that you can do with these outside of using them for magnets like I'm showing you today. And so I really love just grabbing different molds from either Amazon or when I am shopping at the craft store and see some that are discounted. I love to use these molds as like a way to ensure that I'm never wasting my epoxy. I always end up having epoxy left over when I'm working on projects and when I'm doing coats of epoxy. So it's nice to have these kind of right on the same table with my turner to be able to just add the extra additional epoxy into the molds and be able to utilize these for different things. So for these are personally for me, but I did mention you could also use these and turn them into magnets and make it as kind of an additive or an extra for your tumbler sales or for your website as just extra goodies. I love to throw in extra things, so that's also an option as well. So I just used a little bit of that pink that was left and just put it into the mold that had the foil flakes, and then we're going to spray that with 90% alcohol, set that aside, and let those smaller ones cure. These ones have sat for about 4 hours because I did use Chaos Resin Liquidy Split, and so I'm going to add the second layer of colorant now that this first section has set and cured, and we're going to add kind of that colorant behind. So I've mixed up some more Chaos Resin Liquidy Split, and I'm just going to split this into a few other medicine cups. That way I can add a few drops of the colorant and add some of that hot pink coral-ish colored mica powder so that I can add to these larger heart-shaped molds. So these 3 molds too, which I didn't mention, is they're actually different shapes. So they are heart-shaped, but they have a different shape to each of them. They're not all the same. One is kind of almost like has like the sides of what would look like a diamond. The other one is kind of like a free hand-drawn heart, and then the one that's up towards the top right hand side is like, just a very basic, heart-shaped mold. So just adding my colorants, I'm adding my Maestra to which is the blue. That's from the Dollhouse pack from Jen's Crafted Gems. Then we have Little Witchy, which is the purple color in the bottom right hand corner, and then I added just again a little bit of that coral hot pinkish mica powder to that third cup that we'll mix up. So I'm just adding these as to give like a different layer and a little bit of dimension to these that I have started. There's so many different color combinations that really for me this was just to kind of play around with different things as I mentioned, but there's so many different things that you can do with these that you can as far as mixing things up and creating really cool designs. I'm not super I'm not like a pro at this kind of stuff, if that makes sense. You guys have seen that I've done like bookmarks and things like that and done different kind of styles and things, or coasters, which are a little bit larger for me to work on. So it gives me a little bit more opportunity to really decorate them and really put everything together in my head. These were all just for fun, so I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it other than I really just wanted a bunch of cute little magnets that I could use on my custom order board. So I'm just going to fill up the rest of those molds there with the epoxy. All 3 of those molds are now full. I'm going to spray this again with 91% rubbing alcohol because again I want to pop all those bubbles and I want to make sure that this is super clear. That way we can see right through the different colors and right through the resin. So I'm going to let this sit again for another 4 to 5 hours, and then it'll be time to demold them. Okay, so now for the fun part. We're going to demold these and just kind of pull them right out of the molds here. So again, this is Chaos Resin Liquidy Split. So I only needed about 4 or 5 hours in my space before they were ready to come out of the mold. So I'm just going to demold those, and then we'll demold the larger ones. The larger ones probably needed more, closer to 5 hours than the 4-hour mark to be fully cured with that second batch of epoxy that we put on the back half of this. But I kind of love how these came out. They're cute, they're unique, they're different. Again, these are just for me and my custom order board and for different things I have in my space to just keep pinned up. But these are just a fun little way that you can just add, a little bit of decor to your space, or just kind of give yourself some little extra goodies to throw in packages. So the last thing I'm going to do with these is I'm going to add just some little magnets that I purchased off Amazon. I have used these previously in a tutorial where I did a few toppers, like a removable topper forever ago. So I will link that tutorial down in the description box. I'll also link the magnets here, but they're just little small magnets that you can use on different items. I'm going to use these specifically today for putting on the back of these little molds that we've created, and then I'm just going to adhere them with some UV resin. So off camera and off shot is my my light or my lamp, my UV lamp, to cure the UV resin. But I'm just going to put just one on each of the smaller ones, and then you're going to see me with the larger molds because there is larger space and I didn't have the larger magnets like I thought I did. I'm going to end up putting 3 magnets on the back of the larger ones just so that I can have it kind of make sure that it covers a bunch of the surface area when I go to stick them on my board. So literally just put a little kind of dab of UV resin on the back of your molds or whatever you're going to be adhering the magnet to, and then I set it under the lamp for about 30 to 60 seconds. I kind of just left the lamp on or kept turning it on with them under there. So really it only needs about 30 seconds or so to really cure, and then I set it after I've gotten all the magnets on for another 30 seconds, so it seemed to be good after that. So I'm just going to, again, like I said, I'll put 3 magnets on the back of the larger one so it covers more of the surface area of the back end when I go to put these on my board so that they don't fall off. These are pretty strong magnets though. I did test them out on my mount, which is metal, and as you can see I tried to use tweezers. I'm not really sure why I thought I could use tweezers with a magnet knowing that it would stick, so I just end up obviously hand placing them, but they do really stick well, and I think they'll be able to hold quite a bit of paperwork and different orders and things that I like to keep posted on my board. So I'm just going to finish with the magnets, and then I'm going to do just a couple of things just to decorate them. You don't have to do this, certainly, but it's completely up to you. But what I did want to do was add some rhinestones to a couple. I think that adding just different decor to them is also an option too. So I'm going to just grab out some really small 2mm. These might be, yeah, I think these are 2 or 3mm just crystal rhinestones. And so on the pink ones, I ended up just putting these 2mm rhinestones on here just to give it a little extra pizzazz. So another thing that I thought of that you could also do with these, and which would be a great idea, is I know everybody is familiar with like those large paper clips that you can get. Usually teachers use them to like clip papers together, or nurses and things like that, large documents and stuff. So this is also an option, right? You could add this as like an additive right on top of that and adhere it with UV resin. It would be super cute. So here's a look at the final results. Just added some different decor and different stickers and things I had on hand. But I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, give this video a huge thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.